Hello and welcome to the News Podcast, or as I want to call it, the Newscast. Once again, you may recognize our names as a little text under stories, but may not recognize our faces, so we'll go ahead and introduce ourselves again just in case. Hi, my name is Emma Lawson. I am a born and raised Aggie here in Bryan College Station, and I have been covering city council and other things that need to be covered at the Eagle for about a year now. Go ahead and give you the mic.
All right. Hi, I'm Stephen Whitaker. I have been with the Eagle since September. Before I came to the Eagle, I was in San Antonio, where I graduated from UTSA and then worked for several of the publications there, most recently the Express News. Since coming here to Bryan, I've covered pretty much everything at A&M outside of sports, as well as civic events and the local races for the Texas House of Representatives.
Over here.
And my name is Joe Southern. I've been with the Eagle since September, and I've been in journalism for about 37 years now. My primary coverage area is Brazos County and whatever news features or odd events are going on.
Kind of how it is here at the Eagle. We cover a little bit of everything and more. All right, so for this episode, we're going to look back at 2024, where we saw some highs, some lows, and as I would call it, some buffaloes, aka some very bizarre stories that we saw this year that feel more fiction than fact. With this, here at the news desk, we ranked our top 10 stories, the ones that we found the most enjoyable or the most impactful throughout this year, and we picked out a couple that we would like to talk to you today. Starting off with number 10, Student Bonfire.
So in the spring of this year, there was a special committee that came together and submitted a plan to President Welsh that called for the return of Bonfire to the A&M campus. This year was kind of a somber year, as it was the 25th anniversary of the Bonfire collapse of '99. Well, in June of this year, after hearing from those for and against the return of Bonfire, President Welsh decided that there would be no renewal of Bonfire on campus, and he was quoted as saying that Bonfire, both a wonderful and tragic part of Aggie history, should remain in our treasured past, end quote. Now, there has been an unofficial Bonfire held off campus for the last couple of years, and they were going to do that before the game against Texas in November, but we were in the middle of a burn ban, so they had to postpone it to the spring. So my guess is it would probably be around the time they're playing the Longhorns in baseball.
Oh, yeah. And we'll keep playing the Longhorns, to my understanding,
That's
as long as
now
we
that
can.
now that they're in the same conference again, they're forced to.
Yeah, for sure. And for our number 9 story, I understand that we also had a very important birthday celebration.
We certainly did. It was the 100th birthday of President George H.W. Bush, or as we call it here, the 41 at 100 celebration. And it was 3 days of wonderful festivities. It was highlighted by having 9 of his grandchildren do tandem skydives. There was a great concert put on by A&M graduates, Robert Earl Keane and Lyle Lovett. Had a fun time attending that. It was also the grand opening of the new pavilion out at the Bush Library for the Marine One helicopter and the 4141 locomotive, which carried Bush to his final resting spot here in Aggieland. And for those who were able to attend, there was also a meet and greet with President Bush's service dog Sully and our beloved Reveille 10. So a lot of fun times, great memories, and just an enjoyable experience.
Oh, yeah, and it was a gorgeous celebration. Loved being out there. Loved being able to talk to Robert Earl Keane and Lyle Lovett. Who knows, maybe one day they'll still be out on the porch of La Salle Hotel. That's the dream. For our number 8 story, we did choose something that was very important to the city of College Station, and that is the impending housing crisis that the Housing Action Committee discovered whenever they looked at an existing report that we saw. With the population now in the 6 digits, it's no wonder that College Station is struggling to find a place to put everybody, students and permanent citizens, and especially as students come back into town to start their fall or spring semester, we're looking to fit everyone somewhere and really pack them in. A recent study by the city found that there would soon be a housing supply shortage and more middle housing options would be necessary to accommodate for the rapid growth within the city. Whether it be townhouses or apartments, we've seen plenty of new developments beginning within the city. Not to mention with the recent adoption of the Housing Action Plan, College Station City Council kind of has an idea of what they want to do. They have an idea of how they're going to solve this issue. They're looking to incentivize people to create more middle housing options and perhaps to build up. I mean, recently we saw Culpeper with their new, was it like stupidly high story building that they want to create.
14 or 15 stories or something like that.
Yeah, it meant the goodbye of Hurricane Harry's, but who knows? Maybe it'll mean a crazy place to live.
They name it Hurricane Harry Tower.
That feels like it's asking for a disaster to happen at some point.
Knock on that wood.
Like naming a building in Galveston Hurricane.
Yeah.
And next up for number 7, we chose the 2024 election results. And of course, there was a lot to see in, both the county and nationally.
Right. That was one of the most unique elections I've ever seen. You start at the presidential race where you had 2 assassination attempts on former President Trump, followed by President Biden bowing out and Vice President Kamala Harris stepping up and pretty close to coming to pull that off. But just a crazy, crazy time on the national scene. But locally, it was just as crazy. We didn't have any assassination attempts, but
That we knew of, yeah.
that we knew of, yeah. But we did have a lot of voter interest. According to our elections administrator, Trudy Hancock, we set a record with 92,626 people voting. That includes a record of 71,759 people voting early. Mm-hmm. So there was definitely a lot of interest locally. I covered the county commissioner races, which saw Fred Brown defeat Mike Sutherland, a Libertarian candidate, for his seat on Precinct 3 on the commissioners. Mm-hmm. And Brown had previously defeated Nancy Berry for that in the primary, and Nancy just a few hours ago said her goodbyes to the Commissioner Court, along with Steve Aldrich, who also lost in the primary to Bentley Nettles. Both Brown and Nettles will be sworn in tomorrow morning to take their positions. Mm-hmm. But one of the more bizarre things that happened at the county level is we had two propositions, both related to requiring livestock being fenced in. And while they both passed by about 70% margins, they were both put on hold because the process of putting those items on the ballots were not done correctly. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a legal limbo right now until they get all that sorted out.
Oof, good luck with that.
Yeah. So in the state races, so Brazos County is a 2-district county. So in the Texas House, there's District 14, which is all of Bryan and College Station, and then the rest of the county is in District 12. And in both of those districts, the incumbents, which in District 12 was Kyle Casal, and in District 14, John Rainey, they both decided not to run in 24. So the Republicans put new candidates up. Both of those candidates won their races. In District 12, Trey Wharton took Casal's place in Austin. Mm-hmm. And in District 14, it was Paul Dyson taking John Rainey's spot in Austin. Both of those, they won with more than 2/3 of the vote. So they pretty well knew they were going pretty early in the election night. Mm-hmm. And so that'll be interesting to see what they do as freshman representatives next, I guess, in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, no kidding. And over in City Council, of course, Bryan stayed relatively the same, as in relatively the same. All incumbents for the Bryan City Council ended up winning their races and will be serving again for the next 4 years. Meanwhile, in College Station, we saw a bunch of new candidacies and probably the closest race within the county, as Scott Schaefer and Trey Watson's, the winner was decided by a mere 100 votes, I want to say. Probably less than that. Point is, it was the closest race and could not be called on Election Day until all ballots had officially been counted, which was really exciting to follow. Trey Watson got really close, and it was really exciting to see his campaign. But Scott Schaefer did eventually win, and he will be also serving in College Station City Council. And then, of course, you've got Bob Yancey running unopposed. He will be serving once again in the upcoming city councils. All right. With that being said, we'll move to our number 6 story, where A&M will be capping enrollment.
Yeah. So this fall, Texas A&M got over the 72,000 student mark for students enrolled at just the A&M campus in College Station, which moved it to the largest college in the country, past Arizona State. When you include the other A&M campuses, the Health Center in Bryan and the Galveston campus, the McAllen campus, and Qatar also counts toward the College Station enrollment. It's close to 80,000. So this year, President Welsh called on 2 different studies to be conducted. One was the capacity plan and the other capacity study, and the other was the student experience study. The capacity plan came up with the recommendation of capping the number of students enrolled, new students, so like freshmen and transfers, capping that number at 15,000 a year for a 5-year period to allow the rest of the campus to kind of catch up, and they can put a plan together to make sure that they can continue to grow, but not at the rate they have been the past decade, because the school has grown 33% since 2013. So the other side of that was the student experience plan or study, and that one called on more housing on campus for freshmen and sophomores, because they say that's kind of the 2-year window where you're learning the new school and kind of finding your circles that you'll be running in when you figure out your major. So they submitted those to President Welsh in October, and he the thought was he might release his findings and then recommendations going forward before the end of the semester. We're now on New Year's Eve, and he hasn't sent his report or published his report, so that's probably something that will come out early in January or at the start of the spring semester. So that'll be something to keep an eye on.
All right, coming in number 5, we probably had the most bizarre story from 2024, the Krispy Kreme incident. Would you like to tell us more about that?
Right. On the morning of May 13th, right around 2 in the morning, the Krispy Kreme on Harvey exploded and went up in flames and was a complete loss. It seemed to be a mystery. There were racial epithets spray painted onto the building, but authorities kind of looked past that, figuring that it was definitely an arson. And as it turns out, the owner of the franchise, Mr. Brian Davis, was arrested 11 weeks later and charged with that arson. They never did consider it to be a racial issue because Mr. Davis is black. So apparently they're alleging that he did it himself as some kind of insurance fraud. But he was arrested in August and made a $200,000 bond the next day. And the case, as they say, remains under investigation and has not moved forward since.
I was suspicious when I found out that there were accelerants used in the building, which meant that probably some kind of gasoline or something had to have been used. And on a lighter note, there had to have been a moment where the Krispy Kreme smelled really good. Probably not with all the gasoline, but all the uncooked dough and everything. Oh man, I will miss that glaze machine.
Yeah.
And for our number 4 story of the year, we have the fact that John Sharp recently announced his retirement. Tell us more about that.
So in July of this year, Texas A&M Chancellor John Sharp, who's been the chancellor since 2011, announced that he would retire effective June 30th of 2025. So he did that partly to give the regents that much time to find his successor, but also because that gave him enough time to wrap up some of the things he was working on for the system in addition to some of the things, throughout or like, for example, some of the things at Relis, and then other projects going on around all the different universities and agencies that he supervises. And so among the things that he attained while he was chancellor was A&M Law School, which is in Fort Worth. He oversaw the renovation of Kyle Field to the capacity it is now, to where it can be setting records of different kinds, as we'll find out in a later story. And then probably the thing he'll be most remembered for is the Relis campus, which is the old Air Force base off of 21 and 47, which Highway 47 is now the John Sharp Parkway. So that's pretty good if you can get a highway named after you. But what they do out at Relis is all kinds of different research and innovation, not just for A&M and the A&M system, but the state government has people out there working on things, and there's even some federal government agencies that will go out there and do some testing or research. So that's kind of the thing that he'll probably be long remembered for after he retires this June.
Oh, yeah. And I imagine if a great honor is, having a street named after you, the biggest dishonor you can have in this city is number 3, the medians, which we're getting to the top 3 stories. So these are the stories that we feel were the most impactful, most talked about, or just most emotional, perhaps, of the entire year. Medians remained public enemy number 1 in Bryan and College Station, especially the medians in Texas Avenue, which, to my understanding, are some of the biggest offenders. Citizens have been saying that they lower businesses in nearby locations because people can't get into the building, but they also lower safety because safety vehicles can't get to houses as quickly as they could, because U-turns are practically impossible when you're moving that big, crap ton truck, and you're trying to get to the other side of the street. And also the fact that they cause more car crashes than they actually help. So BCS Median Survey Team, which is a grassroots organization that recently started up here in Bryan College Station, hopes to change that fact by talking to both TxDOT and City Council. And to my understanding, they've actually made some pretty good strides. They have a lot of information from TxDOT and some survey information from citizens to talk about why the medians need to go. So I understand many City Council members have been in conversation with TxDOT about what they can do. I don't think TxDOT is too eager to completely bulldoze the medians they just put in.
Some citizens are, though.
But some citizens are all ready to do so themselves. So here's hoping we find an amiable solution before we go full Hunger Games, dystopia, whatever else. We'll move on.
First, it's the medians that go.
Mm-hmm. Next up, we'll move to our number 2 story, the semiconductor plant that is planned. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, that started out as kind of a big mystery when all of our local governments granted tax abatements for this unnamed entity that was going to build a $10 billion facility out at the Relis campus. And at first, nobody seemed to know what it was because the public officials were under non-disclosure agreements and couldn't say what it was. And then the Austin Business Journal did some digging in files with the comptroller's office and found out that it's indeed going to be a semiconductor plant. And that has been of interest too. One, because of the mysterious owner, James Proud, who owns Substrate Incorporated out of San Francisco, which is the parent company to America's Foundry Bryan, and then this facility will be called Project Factory 1. Of course, this is all coming from online documents. Nobody locally is commenting on it, so it's been kind of hard to get some real information. But when Chancellor Sharp was going before the county commissioners to encourage them to pass the abatement at their level, he called it the biggest thing to come to Brazos County since A&M was put here. And then Bryan Mayor Bobby Gutierrez said it was a game-changing project for Bryan, and we're doing everything we can to get it here. And it's expected to double Bryan's tax base if it comes in.
Yeah, it's a big project for sure. And the only story we felt could top this one is number one, the George Strait concert that we had. And of course, ranking on top is the king of country music himself, as makes sense. George Strait set a new national record at Kyle Field, drawing in over 110,000 people, breaking the previous record held by a Grateful Dead concert. Now, I asked this before, and I'll ask it again. Do you think we will have more concerts at Kyle Field? And if so, who is your dream guest at Kyle Field? Mine is personally Pink, because I want to see what aerial stunts she could do when that high in the air from the top floor, personally.
I would say the easiest answer would be the guys that did the concert for Bush 41 at 100. If you get Robert Earl Keen and Lyle Lovett to do a combined concert at Kyle Field, you may not break the George Strait record just because he's so far above everybody else, but you probably would come close, and you might knock the Grateful Dead to third.
Ooh, maybe, yeah.
Now, honestly, I have to say, I think we are going to see more concerts and special events there as long as we're paying off Jimbo Fisher's contract. But, that's fine. Yeah, it's a great venue. I got to be there working security at the event and thoroughly enjoyed what I was able to see. But as far as future acts, personally, I would like to see Garth Brooks come in. Realistically, I think we could break the record if Taylor Swift were to come in.
I would be scared of College Station if Taylor Swift came to Kyle Field. I would not want to be near those college students. Love Taylor Swift, scared of Swifties.
That's the weekend we all go on a vacation or on assignment somewhere that's not here.
For sure. In that case, thank you once again for tuning in to the Eagle newspaper and for reading